Hello, Blake Rudis here with Everyday HDR and HDRinsider.com, and today I'm going to talk about ON1's Perfect Effects 9 and everything that I absolutely love about it. This is a great program. Along the way, we're going to discuss 6 things, but it's more like, 30 or 40 little tips and tricks you're going to pick up along the way, and we're going to take a boring image like this and make it look a little bit more dynamic to something like this. Now, this might be a little edgy and over the top, but you can do so much with Perfect Effects 9, and that's really what I wanted to flaunt here. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so here we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to talk about my 6 favorite things that I love about Perfect Effects 9. However, there's probably more like 30 or 40 little tips and tricks that you're going to catch here along the way, but I clumped it into 6 to make it a nice, even number. The first thing I love about Perfect Effects is that it's a standalone product, but it also works very well as a Photoshop plugin. And the ease of integration with Photoshop is absolutely incredible. So what I do is I go up here to Window, and I go to Extensions, and I'll click on ON1. Now, no matter where this tends to put this ON1 extension, I drag it and drop it and bring it right here into my panel where I do most of my work. So I've got my adjustments, my history, my properties, and ON1 is right here. And on the ease of integration here, all I have to do is double click on Perfect Effects 9. If I have a whole series of groups and filters and layouts down here, it's best if you go to the top one, press Control, Shift, Alt, and E, and make a stamp, and then just double click Perfect Effects 9. What it'll do is it'll create a duplicate copy of that object and bring you right into Perfect Effects 9. So on the ease of integration side, it works seamlessly into my workflow by being easy to find and place in my palettes on the right hand side, but it also creates that duplicate copy, so I don't have to worry about this plugin running on my work and it being destructive. So I can always go back, I can just deselect that eyeball, and we'll see that in the end here. Typically when it opens in Perfect Effects 9, you're going to see this as the layout, which brings me to my second favorite thing about Perfect Effects 9 is the layout. It's very intuitive. On the left-hand side, we're going to have all of our filters and our presets. And these are typically factory created presets that make really good looks on your photos and really quick just by the click of a button. However, I'm not too huge of a fan of presets, especially when I first start an image. I don't like to just click a preset and bring it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to Window, and I'm going to go to Show Browser Panel. And now this gives me the entire image right in front of me, and I don't have to worry about the distractions of the presets on the left-hand side. Also on the left-hand side, now you're going to notice that we have all of our tools here. So we can move our image around with the hand, and then we also have our magnifying glass and some masking tools that will be available once we start building masks on this image. On the right-hand side, we have our layers. There's actually layers that are built right into Perfect Effects, which is absolutely awesome. Incorporated into the layout are the layers on my second favorite thing, but this is like 30 things all in and of itself. Just the fact that you can actually work with layers right here in the program makes this a very powerful program. Below the layers, you're going to see how you can add different layers to this. You can either add individual filters on your own, or you can add a brush filter, adjustment brush filter, or a adjustable gradient filter. And below that, you have the blending options that we'll go over those later, and protection, and so on and so forth. So in order to get into this, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer. Click on that empty layer, and our filters, we're going to choose Tone Enhancer. I like to work with tone and color first. So now, if I adjust any of these settings, it's going to adjust the entire image as a whole. But this will bring me to my third absolute favorite thing that I love about Perfect Effects 9, are the amazing masking features that are built right into it. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to leave this just like this, and I'm going to go to the quick mask option, and I'm just going to drag this around my object here. And this is a pretty easy thing to mask even with the quick selection tool, but this tool is actually pretty powerful even on some hard selections when you pair it in combination with the perfect brush. So what it's going to do, it's going to run its little algorithm, and it's going to separate my background and my foreground. So right now, that mask is only going to affect what's in my foreground and not my background. We can see that if we drop the blacks all the way down and we make that as black as possible there. So now we can see exactly where our mask is affected. If you needed to fix that, you have some refinement tools here. So you could make this brush a little bit smaller, maybe just click and drag around here and refine some of those edges up. And that will refine all of your tricky little edges that maybe didn't get selected as well as maybe you would have liked them to. In accordance with that, you also have my fourth favorite thing, which is the perfect brush. The perfect brush is up here. You have the perfect brush, and you can, if you wanted to, if something got selected that you didn't want, you have your regular brush where you could come in here and just paint regularly and take stuff away. Press Command or Control Z to take that back, or you can go to your perfect brush, and that will just select certain areas at a time. And it's pretty intuitive on these larger objects. But I'm going to press Command or Control Z to erase that because I don't really need to. The perfect brush is my fourth thing that I absolutely love in this. So now let's also talk about masking a little bit more on topic number 3. And that's going to be the fact that with masks, you have the ability to flip them just like you would in Photoshop. So if you have a mask, and maybe we only wanted that mask to work on the background, but when we made our quick mask, guess what? It selected our foreground. All right, so now I can press Command or Control I, just the same exact hotkey that you use in Photoshop, and now that mask is only affecting the background. Let's go ahead and drop our blacks all the way down again because we don't need them that high. And now anything I do here is only going to affect the background of my image and not the foreground. And this is great because I use hotkeys a lot in Photoshop. Actually, if I didn't have hotkeys in Photoshop, I'd be lost. So when I started working with Perfect Effects and saw that they integrated all of the exact same hotkeys into Perfect Effects, and if I want to make my brush larger, right bracket key. That makes my brush larger, just like it does in Photoshop. Smaller, let's make it the left bracket key. And then on our mask, Command or Control I, that will invert our mask. Another cool thing, let's make another tone enhancer layer. We'll click that tone enhancer layer and we'll go, now we've got that new tone enhancer layer. It's going to be affecting the entire image. So now if I want that exact same mask, I don't have to make it again. I can press Alt Option on that mask and move it up, and that will give me the exact same mask on this new tone enhancer layer, just like it does in Photoshop. Let's say I want this tone enhancer to affect the foreground. Command or Control I. I'm now only affecting the foreground. So we'll go ahead and let's just hit auto on this and see what it's going to give us. We can go ahead and increase our contrast, maybe open up some of our shadows a little bit, close out some of our highlights. Now I like the highlights the way they are. Let's increase our whites a little bit to kind of bring out those highlights a little bit more. And now we can even introduce some detail and some clarity. So that is pretty awesome. So 3 and 4 kind of piggyback. Number 3 was the masks and the hotkeys. Number 4 was the perfect brush. And now I'm going to get into the protection of certain things and blending options. So now we have this tone enhancer layer on our foreground. And when I bring up these kind of HDR settings to bring up the detail and bring up the clarity in the image, what I don't like about this is that it's affecting my highlights and my shadows. I only want this to affect my midtones. Well, in Photoshop, you'd have to select just your midtones, make a mask, or maybe do some blend if. Here you have what's called the protection sliders. So if I bring the protection on the whites all the way up, it's going to protect my whites from everything that's happening in this filter. If I bring it up in the shadows, it's going to protect my shadows from everything that's happening in this filter. So now these detail and clarity sliders are only affecting my midtones, which is absolutely incredible because those are the areas that I pretty much want to bring more detail out in the beginning anyway. So that's number 5, protection. We also have the ability to only affect the luminosity of something. Instead of it affecting color, we can only make it affect tone. And we do that because all the same blending options that are in Photoshop are right here in Perfect Effects. So I can select luminosity and make sure that this tone enhancer layer is only affecting the tone and not the color. And then I can do color later. The 6th thing that I absolutely love about Perfect Effects are the filters and the multiple options that you have for filters. And one of those that I really love the most is called the dynamic contrast filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. I'll click on filter down here and go into dynamic contrast. And this is like your pseudo HDR layer. Me being an HDR guy, I absolutely love what I can do here. So we can really hike up those details in the small, medium, and large areas. I would never do this to a photo. Okay, that's really way too much for this photograph. But we can bring the small details down, kind of glaze those over a little bit, maybe make our medium details up a little bit, and then bring down our large ones. So that here's the before and after on that. We really just have our kind of like a hazing glow over our large areas and over our small areas. Let's Let's bring this up just a little bit. And then our mid areas, our medium detail areas are brought out a little bit more. Again, if I want to protect these areas, I can just bring that up in the highlights to make sure that my highlights aren't affected by this dynamic contrast, and maybe in the shadows too. Because typically when you increase the dynamic contrast in an area, it might make some more noise. And if it does that, it's probably going to do it in the shadow areas. So you can just bring that up and protect your shadow areas. And we'll look at that dynamic contrast. So now let's say I only want that to affect my foreground. Well, press Alt Option on that mask that we have down here for our foreground and bring it up. Now we can make another dynamic contrast filter for our background. So we'll go to Filter, go to Dynamic Contrast, and we'll press Alt Option on this mask that was just for our background and use dynamic contrast on the background. See, on the flip side of this, a lot of people think that the dynamic contrast is used to, heighten things up and make these really outlandish HDR images. However, you can also use it in reverse. We can bring our small details all the way down, bring the medium details all the way down, and kind of give our background a nice kind of hazing kind of glow. And I used a big stopper on this image. It was a very long exposure photograph, so we had the clouds kind of converging and moving, and we're capturing all that cloud movement. So if I bring up the details on this, it's going to kind of negate all the things that I did with that long exposure. So I'm going to bring that down in the small and the medium, and maybe bring it up in the large just to bring out some of those larger areas of detail. And again, if I wanted to protect anything, I could protect my shadows, I could protect my highlights, or I could protect my midtones, which they say skin here, but it's very much like your midtones. So that would be some protection. If I don't want that to affect the color, I only want it to affect tone, I can change that to luminosity, and there we go. It's only affecting the tone of that background and not the color. So that's great. I love these filters. Another one of my favorite filters in here, and this might not be suitable for this image, but we'll see. We'll go ahead and add a new layer, go to Filter, and this one's new for Perfect Effects 9. It's called the Lens Flare filter. This is pretty neat because the lens flare filter allows you to select two different points. You can select the point that you want your light source to be. So we want our light source to come from here. So I'll click on the light source, and this is going to be our light source. And then where was my camera angle? So I'll click here and say that this was about my camera angle. So now it's going to give me a lens flare in accordance with that camera angle that I was at. And it's really cool here because you can create some pretty interesting things with this lens flare. And you can show the rings if you want, so it gets that kind of lens flare ring effect. I'm not a big fan of that, so I'm going to turn that off on the rings, which is really cool because one of the things that I like about the lens flare is kind of the color cast that it gives you, but I'm not a big fan of the rings that it gives you, especially in the Photoshop lens flare filter. So we can take the rings off. And then we can also change the overall color of this and kind of color grade our image accordingly. So we can, let's bring down the size and the amount in that. And now I've just got a nice little color graded image with an interesting little lens flare up at the top. So for this image, the lens flare may not be suited, so I'll just go ahead and take that off, and you can delete that one layer. If we press the trash can key, it's going to trash everything and bring us back to our empty layer. We can press Command or Control Z to undo, and that'll bring everything back. So let's just click this layer and press the minus sign. So pretty intuitive process here for building. And then when we press apply, all the way back to number one, what I love about Perfect Effects is that it integrates so well with Photoshop. What it's going to do is it's going to run its magic. It's going to spit out that layer for me and put it right on top of all of my work that I did in Photoshop. And if it's too much, I can always drop the opacity a little bit here to bring back my original layer, or I can protect that area by going into my blend if options, and maybe I don't want the black areas in my original photo to be affected by this. I can go ahead and just blend that seamlessly in, and now my integration with Photoshop is perfect. So the 6 things that I love about Perfect Effects 9. Number 1, ease of integration into Photoshop. We got that panel on the side, and we also have the ability that after we run through Perfect Effects, it's going to create a new layer on our work and be completely non-destructive. Then we have our layout. The layout of Perfect Effects 9 in general is great. It's very intuitive. Presets on the left, we can turn them off if we want. All of our brushes are on the left. On the right, we have all of our work. We have our filters, or we have our layers, we have our blending options, and the different layers that we can add right there in Perfect Effects. Then we have our masks and hotkeys. Number 3, the ability to add masks right in Perfect Effects with the powerful filters that are in there, and still be able to use the hotkeys that we do in Photoshop to invert those masks and apply those same masks to other layers. Absolutely impressive. Number 4, the perfect brush. Now in this, I didn't really show the true capabilities of the perfect brush, but in HDR and Perfect Effects 9, the Essential Workflow Secrets, I go over that perfect brush quite a bit. And instead of using the quick mask, I use more of the perfect brush and the regular brush to make my masks so you can really see the true potential of the masking. Number 5, the protection and blending options that are available. The ability to be able to protect your highlights, midtones, and shadows, and also be able to blend those just like you do in Photoshop makes Perfect Effects 9 absolutely incredible. That in and of itself with the protection feature, I just love that. And then number 6, the last and final thing, the filters. There are a ton of filters that are built right into Perfect Effects 9, and you can add some really intense effects to your image. And what you see here is this was an image straight out of Camera Raw. All I did was some perspective, maybe some vignetting correction, some chromatic aberration correction, and then I went right into Perfect Effects 9. And almost all my Photoshop work is done. It's a really simple, easy way to add effects to your photographs without being too labor intensive, but really create a powerful product. What the folks at On1 have done with Perfect Effects 9 is absolutely impressive. Please, if you like this, check out HDR and Perfect Effects 9, the Essential Workflow Secrets. It's a 4-part series about HDR and Perfect Effects 9, how you can integrate Perfect Effects 9 into your HDR workflow. It's about an hour and 45 minutes long, and I pack a ton of useful information in there. If you like what you see here, there is a ton more information there. You can go ahead and hop over to everydayhdr.com and pick that up, or go to the On1 store and pick it up in their store. If you like this, please subscribe, like it, share it. On1 has done some amazing things here. So let's go ahead and give them the courtesy that they deserve and spread the word. Thank you very much for watching this. I'm Blake Rudis with Everyday HDR and HDRinsider.com.